welcome.
Thank
Very
you.
very excited to have you here. I was chatting with Alana, I guess, on text maybe like a week ago or so, and we were talking about, I don't really remember what. Probably something to do with me having COVID. And then it segued into her mentioning that you're having some things happening, I guess, at night or in your dreams.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like I don't know, my reality is changing quite a bit, and so I think the fabric of what I think is reality, I'm questioning a little bit, and so I think what kind of sparked this was there's probably been several dreams, but there's two that really stand out that don't feel so much like dreams, but more of like visitations, and it's not so. It's even challenging for me to talk about because I think I question, like, am I making this up or what's going on? So the first one, so actually, I went to bed early and I went upstairs and Alana stayed downstairs. And usually we always go to bed together. So I fell asleep probably for like an hour. And I don't know if you've seen that movie Inception, but it was like dream inside a dream inside a dream, where it's like you don't know what is reality. So I'm in dream world, the dream world that doesn't make sense, that's just random stuff going on. And in the middle of it, it's like the lights went out and just went black. And then all of a sudden there was a bright light and I turned and I remember asking the question, like, are you aliens? And before, like, I knew the answer before even asking the question. And then I was like, boom, I was like in my bedroom and I'm in my bed and I'm aware that I just had this weird experience. I'm aware that Alana's downstairs. Alana comes up. She gets on the bed and she's like, why are you still up? I go, I just had this weird thing with aliens. And she laughs at me. And then I go, did you feel anything weird? And she goes, no. And then all of a sudden, boom, I'm floating above the bed. And it's just this, and I'm trying to speak or yell and I can't get anything out. I'm like paralyzed. And then, boom, I wake up and I'm in bed. And then the same scenario happens. Alana comes upstairs, gets in the bed. How come you're not asleep? I just had this experience with aliens. And so then I was like up the rest of the night.
After that one, yeah.
So I was just like really, the way that the same scenario played out like twice and kind of played out the same, and just having this feeling of like it was different than a dream. Like I've had kind of spooky dreams before, but
Oh, no, I know exactly what you're talking about. So I'll give you an example of one of the things that happened. So you're saying that there's two dreams. So I have one that correlates to that. In my early 20s, when I was still not really into spirituality so much, I had a recurring dream where I was basically my body became possessed by something and I couldn't move. And then I was crawling out to my friends and they were just like watching TV being like, what are you doing, man? Like, what's going on? And I was just like, and I like couldn't control. And then I woke up in my bed and the same thing happened. I got possessed by this thing. I didn't, however, go outside, but I was like, it was a recurring loop that would happen. And it would end up being that I would become like controlled by this thing and it would overtake me and it would like slam me against the wall, like all of the things that you would assume that would be horrible when you're possessed, right?
yeah.
So that experience was something that recurred every night for a week straight. And just as like a sequence of what that led into was massive awakening and awareness, right? There's something to do with our human experience and fear that correlate to like how we stand up to it. And in those moments, I remember calling my dad and being like, hey, just so you know, I'm having these dreams, and if they keep going, like, I'm gonna kill myself. Like, I cannot live like this. Because it was like looping in the dream, and like reality was distorted and everything. I was literally in my bed and becoming possessed as if I had not gone to sleep, right? And that was the part that was like the trippiest and the hardest to deal with. But regardless, I realized that like that was a moment and I was having a time where I was like, hey, I like want to escape this, right? But as I went through, I realized there's only one response to fear, and it's rising up to it. There's a lot of like dream doctors and people that have talked about different paths that you can do. Like if you're being chased by something, right? If you're being chased by an entity or a monster, turn around and ask what they want, right? There's this like very interesting aspect where it's showing us our subconscious tendencies. Usually that's what I perceive our dreams to be. So when I am dreaming and I have something happen, maybe I'm dying or I'm going to be killed, something extreme, I'll always wake up and note exactly what it was that I felt in my body to know that that's something that I contain. Because I don't believe we can have something happen in our dreams that's an emotional response that's not actually true to ourself, right? And what you're experiencing is true to yourself, not even in the dream form. You know, you're experiencing it currently, so you're able to see yourself. But that's what it's always beckoning, I believe. The beckoning is always to see what that emotion is and what that response mechanism is essentially to like or coping, right? What we do to cope. And what do you feel like that was? So what you stayed up all night, but what was your coping mechanism that was coming up for you?
Well, I didn't really have one. That was what was kind of jarring. And I think the other part of it was the jarring part was the feeling of paralysis, like not being able to speak, not being able to like just feeling kind of like frozen, like I wasn't in control. So even in that moment when I'm trying to scream or make a noise, like all I could kind of muster out was like, and the part
identical to what my experience was.
And the part that I left out is, so when I woke up in bed the second time and Alana actually came upstairs and asked me what was going on and I told her, she goes, "Oh, I thought I heard a woman screaming." Oh. But she's like, "I thought it was someone outside." I was like, "You didn't come up to check?" So then that tripped me out even more because it was like, okay, like something was actually happening for me that wasn't just a dream, right? So yeah, so I think my mind was just kind of spinning. I think for a few reasons. One, I mean, I don't even watch like alien movies and stuff, so it's not like it's like this thing that I consume that I would be like, oh, I'm manifesting that. In the, like, I mean, I know I'm manifesting it, but you know what I mean? Like, it's not like when you watch something before bed and then it shows up in your dream kind of thing. Yes. So that was kind of jarring. And then I had about a week later another one that was a bit different. I don't know if you want me to get into that one.
Sure, go for it.
So that one was kind of a similar scenario where I wake up in my bed, but this time there's a figure that's kind of like cloaked. Like I can't really tell who or what they are, but it's just like a black cloak. And it's kind of like I'm laying in bed and it's like I'm open my eyes and like their torso's right in front of me and they have their hand on my head. And I'm trying to reach out to do something. And again, I'm in that state of paralysis. And I can't do anything. And it feels like they're doing something. And then I can hear like a language in my head that I don't understand. Almost like if I was like listening to like whales deep in the ocean, like a bunch of like, and so then again, when that was over, it was just like, I felt all kind of like, I remember getting up to go to the bathroom and just kind of like closing my eyes for a second and my brain kind of just firing and being all tingly, almost like if I just did a microdose of mushrooms or something, like just those little kind of like you feel those little neurons firing or something. I don't know quite how to explain it. So again, that was kind of like, okay, I can't get back to sleep. You know, kind of numbed out a little bit on YouTube.
Yeah. That's your coping mechanism then. You know, there's going to be something, right? And it's even if it feels like nothing, it's usually disassociation or avoidance or some sort of like just let's let that just go into the back burner. But what's interesting is, you know, with physical symptoms and issues, right? It's first comes as like a knock and then it's like yelling at us and it becomes more and more extreme. So I do believe in this context, it's very similar. So, but at the same time, our physical existence now as humans, right? We don't have the same amount of fear-based stimuli that the universe can orchestrate experiences us for ourselves to confront fear, right? So let's say within your karmic pattern of what you need to unfold in this life, you would have need to have interacted with a snake or something like that, or you would have need to have had some experience where people grabbed you and shook you down, and like had some sort of fear where you're out of control. It's interesting because the way that my mind works as far as the understanding of this world we are in is that everything is actually perfect. It's exactly what it needs to be for each individual based on their karma unfolding. And as far as the way that spirits work to interact with us, I believe there is a very similar correlation with that as what could happen physically, but there's no opportunity to attract that physically into our experience. So we must always have things that purge stuff out of us. If someone in your family dies, boom, that is some massive, it could be fear of death coming up, could be just full out grief. All of those things are necessary for us as learning and growth experiences, as massive emotions to be transcended, right? And they transcend themselves, but at the same time, within this parameter, it's slightly different because it's not just like you got bit by a snake or almost or something. It's that you are being semi-possessed by this experience and in a paralysis. On a side note, have you ever Wikipedia'd sleep paralysis and like read through it?
No, I'm kind of aware of people who have just woken up and then they've been in a state of paralysis. It's interesting you say that. I actually didn't even correlate my experience with that. So
that's what this is. Yeah, and like I have a lot of experience with this. Like my first experience, I was 7, and it was just paralysis, no demons. After that, it was pretty much all demons, right? And it truly is like harrowing. I don't know what you'd call it. It's like very challenging in the moment. My most recent one was, I hadn't had one for years and years and years. And when me and my partner got together, I had one where I was looking at, laying in bed, looking at the curtain, and closed my eyes, opened them, and I was in the paralysis, but I didn't know, and I thought I was on my bed as everything looks the same. And then the curtain started to like morph and transform, and then I heard a knock at the door, and then someone screaming like, let me in, and I was like, whoa, what's going on? And then this like demon hopped on my chest and started twisting my spine, and it was really, really challenging. And that's all, like, only usually the paralysis experience for you is probably like 30 seconds or something, like it was really quick, but really startling, like as maxed out nervous system,
yes.
As you could possibly get,
yes.
right? So the coming back full circle just to the coping mechanism, right? And then the energy that needed to come up, right? So your coping was your option that you did. Numb out, avoid it, just pretend it didn't happen, right? And then there's what energy do you believe is seeking to be manifested through this experience? Because that's what I believe all of these are creating for us. Every opportunity in life is like, what do you want to manifest as a quality in response to this? Do you kind of understand what I mean?
I kind of understand what you're saying. I don't know that I've figured it out, but
right. Well,
yeah,
I'm just
sure.
inquiring, right?
Sure.
What you could
I think for
speculate.
me, like what I'm noticing. So after that second time, not that night, but on another night, I woke up like 3 a.m. and had like the gnarliest panic attack, and I've never experienced panic on that level. So I thought I knew what anxiety was. I've experienced anxiety where I can't quite catch my breath.
Yeah.
But this was like I was in the throes of an ayahuasca ceremony and being freaked out because I'm sober and I didn't take any drugs. So why am I here? And just in this, like, everything, nervous system fully firing. And so to kind of get back to your question, I think there's something, my instinct is like there's either some sort of trauma that's trying to move through, or just being in my feeling body because I have such a tendency to go to the mind. So even in that moment of the nervous system firing and feeling like, for lack of a better description, in an ayahuasca ceremony, I right away go to like, why is this happening?
How can I fix it?
How can I'm sober, and so do I need to go for a run? Do I need to, like, I literally, and then I get in this mental loop where I honestly thought, like, maybe I need to take myself to the hospital and get sedated because I started going, like, am I going crazy? Am I going mad? Am I having a psychotic break? And so it's like this there's a fear there of being lost in my mind and not being able to get out. And so even though I'm feeling all of this intense stuff in the body, it's like it moves up into the mind. And then the mind is what is destroying me in those moments. And so I laid on the floor. I didn't wake up Alana, my partner. It was 3 a.m. I probably laid on the floor listening to like root chakra music, just laying there, just kind of praying for the best until like the sun came up. And I felt like I had a little bit of optimism when the sun came up.
Right. Okay, I hear you. So as far as like a quality in response to the experience. So like, let's say if someone were to be outside and there are snakes, human has a natural predisposition to have a fear of snake and an automatic nervous system response. And then when they go to bed the next days, they could think that snakes are in their bed. There's something going on, right? And then there's an enhanced nervous system agitation, you could say, right? Not saying that there was anything prior to that sequenced this, but this is the experience, right? This is the manifestation of the fear coming through, and now the response is like, oh no, maybe I could be going crazy. Not saying that's your coping mechanism, but that's one of your fear-based responses.
There's definitely a fear of my mind that's coming up.
Right. A fear, essentially, the root of this, I feel like, is a fear of being out of control. So when I was being possessed, I felt the response as I am scared to be out of control in this experience, and I don't know, how to cope with this or deal with this. So would the response as far as a quality be like, well, I need to just like have control? Well, that doesn't work, because when you're in sleep paralysis, that actually isn't an option to gain control, because as much control as we could ever want to have, we're like, you're like, can't do it. So the thing that I found, so I'm going to give one of the experiences that I had, which was I moved out to a property and it was like on 5 acres by myself. It was a loud, old kind of house, and there was like a bunch of sounds that would be happening from like the dryer or the heating system, I don't know what, but just be knocks and stuff. So when I would be at night meditating on my own in this house in the middle of nowhere, and I started hearing knocks and stuff, it tripped me out. And that started to activate and spiral me into a little bit of a fear, right? It's just like fear of the dark or something, fear of, I don't know what that sound is. And that made me kind of like get into a state where I just got more fear. It was like an amplification of fear. So I would sometimes run to my bed and go under the covers and be like, I'm safe, right? And it was like, that was the coping for dealing with that fear. And then I kept going out, meditating, maybe would smoke a bit of cannabis or have a bit of shrooms or something, and actually be like seeing some stuff, and it was spiraling. And then what happened was a sleep paralysis where all of that energy came into fruition, and it was as if I was I was fully paralyzed, and there was like basically a demon witch thing on my chest, and she had a knife, and she was just going into my neck. And at that moment, I had the opportunity to be like, no, or just be like, just take me. And in that moment, it was a just take me. And that was the quality I realized that I needed in those moments, was that if I'm in that state and I'm getting a little bit of fear, or fear of being out of control or not knowing, it's like the fear of the unknown. I don't know what that sound is. It spirals me, and then it brings me to a point of understanding that the master key for all feelings we don't like is actually to surrender into it. Right? When we surrender into it, we get to learn that, I believe, that they're all smoke and mirrors. It's all smoke and mirrors. So this whole thing is an illusion for you to activate a quality within yourself, which that quality could be surrendering deeper into life, because there's a part of you maybe that wants to have control over things you cannot control. I'm not sure if any of that resonates or is applicable to any other aspects of your life. But I do believe that there's something that is coming through here, which is meant to manifest a quality that quality is going to be the next step in application to any other aspect of your life, which I think every human being can use more surrender. Every human being can use more just like, embracing the unknown, letting go of control, all that stuff.
Yeah, no, I mean, that makes sense. I think that's part of when I get lost in those moments and get in the mental loop. It's like there's a fear of like I feel untethered. I feel untethered from my reality or ungrounded. And then that surrender you're talking about, yeah, I think I am fighting against that because I'm scared I won't come back. Again, it comes back to this fear of like, am I going crazy? Am I going mad? And will I, if I completely surrender into those darker thoughts,
Yes.
what if I don't come back? What if the next stop is the rubber room?
The real question is, what won't come back? Because that is one of the key aspects of what we will be letting go of. What are you willing to let go of? The universe always asks us, right? If we're on the path and the trajectory of love and light, it's a path of letting go. It's not a path of embracing and clinging on and drudging forward towards more stuff or more things or more, more. It's a what can I let go of more and more and more. And the true surrender is letting go of our entire identity. So the fear of going crazy is actually just like an aspect of your personality holding on because that aspect of your personality you have identified to. Do you kind of understand that?
Totally. Like
So,
I can recognize that I'm being called to a higher version of myself and I'm being tested, but the tests are really, really hard.
Yes, they are. Of course, they're going to be. Yeah.
And so there's, just to back up a few steps, even before these paralysis dreams started happening, there's been some different experiences that I've had where I can feel within myself that something has opened up. And there are moments when I am walking around like a giant Care Bear where it just feels like my heart is just like exploding. And I've never been in that place before. And then, the pendulum swung so far the other way that it was jarring. So one moment I'm like, yeah, I'm ready for this. And then it's like, if you're ready for this, now deal with this.
Yes.
And then that's the problem I'm having. Like, it's like I can, again, using the mind, I can understand intellectually you can't have the light without the dark and all this different stuff, but I'm being asked to actually experience it and actually truly practice it. And it's difficult because it's happening in the context of my sober life. And there's even a mental block about that, about like if I'm working with sacred medicines, it's like I'm making an agreement, like I'm stepping into this arena and it's like the rules of the game, so to speak. I understand that, okay, lean towards the dark, surrender, all these different elements. But because I didn't make that agreement and it's happening when I'm not prepared for it or making that agreement, then that's what's really tripping me out, because it's like, well, I didn't enter this sacred medicine realm. Why am I here? And so then I get really lost in the like, why am I here?
That's the beauty about working with things like ayahuasca, where it's a controlled experiment. It's an environment where you're like, all right, here goes to 5 to 7 hours,
Right.
and you can be like, hey, I signed up for this. Here we go. I'm holding on. But yeah, when the going gets tough in everyday life and those similar forms of challenges come up, that is where we learn what we're actually made of.
Right.
Because anyone can show up for 5 hours and be a ayahuasca. Like, I've done this a bunch of times. Here we go.
Right.
I can show up for this time. But when it comes to life and experiencing the pendulum swings of all that Care Bear love, heart open expansion, and then when that pendulum swings into this is what is in the way of that being a not necessarily permanent experience, although I'm sure it can be, but for most of us, that's not the case. But this is what's in the way of this being a larger percentage of your experience, right? Like, because wherever we are interacting from, let's say someone is predisposed to like massive anger bursts, right? What amount of time do they have where they're in Care Bear? Maybe like 1 or 2%, right? And then we can build that as we let go of that anger version of ourselves being the thing we identify with that helps us feel like we have power. So there's an aspect of your psyche that you are identifying to that is similar to the person that would have anger. That would be like, I identify to this because it serves me. Is anyone that's in like anger spells, they're choosing it. They're unaware and then they become aware. And through certain states, they can choose to continue doing it. Like, I know I'm doing it, but it feels good. But then they don't know why it feels good. And then when they discover why it feels good, it's like, oh, it's actually because I feel powerless. This whole thing's phony now. Like, I felt power, but it's from a state of feeling powerless. And it's like the deeper we go, we get to see further. For you, luckily, it's not that you have something where, you have a predisposition of being nasty or something. But that makes it harder because it's easier for that person to spot. But then at a certain point, the refinement of our character comes like, okay, is my extrovertive personality a coping mechanism for not wanting to go deeper within myself and thinking that my extrovertive service is now more valuable than me dismantling more of who I am, right? And I believe there's a weave that we have between both sides. So we go into one thing, we do our work, and then we express it, and then we see that, we've kind of like actualized what that aspect of our personality can express, and then we go back into letting go of more of our personality. So I just see within myself that there are aspects that are still positive aspects. Like, if I want to serve people, it's not a bad thing, but it could be something getting in the way of the next step of my evolution. And it could be me seeking control where I could surrender that control, and that could be, it could be something good that you actually have within yourself, but it makes you feel comfort, makes you feel safe, and not saying it's a bad thing, but it might be something that needs to be surrendered to get to the next step of the journey, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think stoicism is my calling card. And so I think, there can be chaos around me, and I've often been praised for being even keeled and being calm. But people don't recognize is oftentimes I'm not calm. And so I can see that there's probably that piece of my psyche and personality that I'm hanging on to in terms of, like I said, the pendulum swinging this way where I'm opening up emotional expression in a new way, and that feels exciting when it is the love and the joy and all this other stuff. And then there's the fear and pack it back up, I guess, when the other emotions like maybe fear or emotions that I'm identifying as not good emotions. There's a fear in fully embracing and expressing that. And so even in this panic attack that was super gnarly, the next day it was coming in waves. And even talking to my partner, it's like I was literally one step away from driving myself to the hospital. And as I'm talking to my partner, that's not being reflected to her because my stoic exterior is not communicating. So inside, I'm freaking the fuck out. And I'm saying, I don't feel right. I feel like I'm going crazy. But it's obviously coming out where she's looking at me going like, he seems pretty normal to me, other than he's just saying he's freaking out. So it's just like, chill out, have some tea, have whatever. And then it's like, no, you don't get it. Like, this is bigger than that.
So I'm hearing that stoicism and people painting you into that light, you have invested in and bought into that as being an aspect of your character. Right? So I'm not saying that isn't naturally who you are. It could be, right? Sometimes we have to practice stoicism, and sometimes it's just, you're that type. But it does sound like the next step of the journey is the surrendering into the vulnerability of being authentic. If you are scared, allowing yourself to seem scared, especially as a man, right? Like, being vulnerable is one of the key aspects of what we need to be doing to dismantle the whole idea of that stoicism and not showing our feelings is some sort of benefit to us. There are times, if you're at work, maybe it's not the time and place when you're dealing with a customer, but when you're with the person that is your love, if they're not able to see all of you and see the true depth of what is actually being experienced because you have an inability to express it, because there must be some sort of thing you're getting out of that you don't want to alert her, you don't want to make her uncomfortable, or that you want to seem like you're that person, right? I'm not sure what
Well,
it
in
is
that
for
moment,
you.
I didn't want to be.
Yeah.
And in that moment, I wanted to communicate to her how much I was freaking
Right.
out, but it just wasn't landing that way. And so
Right.
there's, and so I think there is a reluctance to, I feel very, like I want to be vulnerable. It's not like I don't want people to see me cry or I don't want people to see me be emotional. It's, as you're talking, I'm starting to recognize it's what I've clearly compartmentalized as not okay emotions. And that whole idea of being scared of going mad or crazy is that there's some sort of anger or violence that's going to come out. I'm just recognizing that as we're talking. And so I think that feeling of like this intense, like dark, and maybe it's violent, maybe it's anger, and it's just like, I'm going crazy. I'm going crazy, and it's like I don't know what to do because I don't have a healthy expression of those emotions or haven't been taught how to deal with those emotions.
Right. Well, it's so there's a fear that they will overtake you.
Yes.
Have you been overtaken by anger before or something, and you've had a response to it in which was like, that cannot happen, like you shut yourself down?
Nothing in recent years, but maybe because I've shut it down.
Right. Well, it can go back very far, right? Like these are things that, let's say like was brought up in this place we call Poco, and there's a certain way you act and there's certain things you do and don't do, and that conditions us, right? Like through time, it's like these feelings you don't express. Around here, anger is totally fine to express. Like let that out, and like we'll hear it, and we'll go beat that guy up too. It's like that is where the channel and the outlet for anger can be heard and understood. And there is kind of like a requirement to have a safe space to have that heard, right? And it can be your partner, but it can also be that your partner is like, whoa, I don't even understand this aspect of this person because this is a different person. I'm not able to see this. But at the same time, if you are vulnerable to the point where you let her know, or whoever else is close to you that you share with, that like feel like there might be some aspects of my personality that might be coming out, and just know that it's a transmutation, and I'm not trying to make the situation messy, but I want to be honoring myself and be able to completely do what is necessary to get to the next step of my journey. Because truthfully, on the spiritual path, it's like, expand, and then spiral out in dark night of the soul. And then like expand, and dark. And like you never go down as dark as you have gone before. But if you don't have those death moments where you don't know what's going to happen, and, you kind of let that energy come out. The thing that I can say just from reflecting and experiencing you now is that I believe if those energies came up, what I do if they come up in me, right? Like I've had situations that were very challenging, and what I let myself do is go down the pathway in my mind of what expressing that anger might look like, what expressing that violence might look like, and let yourself fester in those thoughts for a little while, but then pull yourself out of it and be like, whoa, okay, I'm festering, and I'm not saying that's something that you're going to do, but there is always a safe avenue within our psyche that we can work with any energies. Like they're all, like our psyche should be our safe space, and it doesn't mean that we should yell and rant about these people that we hate because, and make your partner have to deal with that, or them deal with, you telling them about them, right? But ultimately you can create that safe space within yourself, but this is what is kind of being beckoned through this experience, is that you don't feel like that is the safe space. You don't feel like you have a safe space within yourself to have any feeling come up, any thoughts of like, what's the worst thing, murder, whatever.
That's the
thoughts.
thing. It will get real dark like that, and
Yeah.
then it's like, well, yeah, I wanna stop that.
Well, so this is why I'm expressing allowing the thought process to play itself out. Because like one of the things that we can do is we can imagine something happening, see what the full fruition of it is. Like, okay, I like killed this person, and then what did I get? It's like, well, I didn't really get anything. It's like I feel like humans too often shove everything under the rug, and that can work for certain people. And I'm not saying what works for everyone, but at a certain step of our journey, we have to understand that there's ancestral programming within our psyche that runs very deep, and it's very dark, and that is us. And most people think that we can bypass our way to the promised land of our personal evolution, and I don't believe that to be so. We have stories of gurus and mystics and all of these things happening, but we don't know what their karma was coming into this existence, and we don't know how that needed to play out. But for most of us, we know we had past lives and past existences, at least ancestrally, that we were killing people, like a lot, right? And like that is within us. And in order to let that out is to let those thoughts play themselves out and not try to stuff it under, but obviously not act on it. Obviously.
Yeah, and I don't feel like that's an actual risk.
Of course. But for the people that are listening, but yeah, just letting that play out in your consciousness. And I would suggest practicing playing out those like certain thoughts. Like, what is your scariest thought? What is the worst thought you could ever think of? And make friends with that and be like, okay, because sometimes people have fear of themselves and sometimes people have fear of others. So you can work with both of them, because we should dissolve the fear between each of those. But like I spend a lot of time, periodically at least, learning about serial killers, because when I was a kid, I was very scared because I watched a show when I was like 7 of a serial killer going into this lady's house and he just killed her for no reason. And I was like, people do that? I was like, man, like I was like 7 and it was freaked me out. And I realized that got deep in me. And that was something that I actually had a fear of probably when I was in that house. That some guy was just going to come in here and kill me for whatever reason, Like how rare that actually is. But, and to make friends with that idea, not to say it's a good thing, but what are the energies that come up in our body when that thought process is playing itself out? Right? There's going to be a lot of feelings. When I listen to these stories, it's like, whoa, like I'm feeling empathically what the victim is feeling and what the perpetrator was feeling, because their life experience brought them to a point where they thought that was a good idea. So playing through both aspects has been beneficial, at least for me, as an experience of what I would fear or what we resist persists, some sort of like fear of if that
Totally
makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, I think definitely the fear is not so much external at this point. The fear is internal.
Yeah.
And the fear is like, I'm going to uncover something I don't want to uncover. Something's going to come out that doesn't want to come out. There's nothing that I consciously am aware of, but I think there's almost this fear, especially with these experiences happening, is like, is there like a repressed memory that's trying to play out? And then what is that repressed memory? And so then I even like have been journaling kind of like, okay, so like thinking of like nasty things and bad, like what if it's this? What if it's that? And it's like on paper, I'm okay with it because I know it doesn't really change me. But when I'm in the throes of those experiences, there's still that door of like, I don't want to open the door.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, it's understandable why, because the only thing that is the antidote to that is to surrender yourself, right? Like that's the only antidote. Like you can try to fight it. You could try to do, tobacco, some sort of clearing. You could do some sort of like, spells, whatever. And there are things that are temporary. Like this is anything that we do like that is a temporary band-aid for our karma. If we want to break from karma, the universe allows us to do that. It goes, okay, we sage the place, it's clear. It's like clear for a moment in time, but whatever karmic activations are latent within this physical vehicle, they're gonna come up. And there are times where there's more than we can bear, and we decide when that is, and we start using some tobacco, clear the space, right? But if we're at a place where it's like, I just don't want, like, I really like where I'm at. From what I'm hearing, you really like where you're at. You're kind of attached to, I don't really want to go and discombobulate this human experience because maybe you like your career, maybe you like what's going on anywhere, and we can still like it, but we must be willing to surrender all in those moments, because what that demon or that energy is coming to get is literally an aspect of your personality. It's like there's a aspect of your personality that you're attached to, and they can use that as a back door to your consciousness to just be like, ha, I gotcha. Ha, right. I gotcha. And you're like your only option. It's as if your higher self has just been like, all right, you guys wreak havoc on me, because I will not evolve past this point had this experience not happened, right? And if you kind of hear that.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I don't feel attached to career. Mm-hmm. I don't even feel like I identify with my relationship. Mm-hmm. Like I'm fine to like I feel like that is already, but there's clearly something deeper that I'm hanging on to, and that's the piece that I'm trying to figure out. I guess my question to you, and I don't know if you can answer this, is like if there is something that needs to move through, like I guess, can it be not to me in this lifetime? Could it be past life? Could it be ancestral stuff? Or is it always going to be like, when I'm facing those resistance and I'm scared to go through that door, sometimes even question like, what if it's not even my stuff that's trying to move through? Or am I trying to go too deep there?
No. I don't think that's too deep, because there's a correlation between everything. So let's say, in my experience, my past lives, a lot of them were of a warrior, okay? In that warrior life, I did a lot of killing. So that correlated with not just the quality of hitting an axe, there were many things that were built up that developed that character that had the ability to do that. Must have been somewhat narcissistic. Think I am better than thou, that you are worthless, you are less than me. These are the thoughts, beliefs, and patterning that come up in this life. Even though the actions may not be the same, the patterning within the consciousness will be the same. So that continuum of karma is always present within us. That's why I believe like the looking back into past lives can be enlightening to a small degree, but it can also be a little bit of a distortion, thinking that there's that much we can get out of it, because whatever we can get out of it is currently alive in the present moment, because this is the present and we are here, and that thing we are seeing is now gone, but the remnants of that might be still here. So the thing that is calling you could be correlating to a past life, but there's no action or deed in which is coming to get you, right? It's like there's an aspect of your psyche that I'd say your highest self is beckoning you to surrender into, let go of. Seems like one of the big pieces here, because you already started observing yourself in this way, was to see that you are trying to articulate something to your partner, and you found you were unable to actually articulate that thing in the way that the gravity was felt emotionally by her, by no fault of her own. Mm-hmm. That's a big realization. I'd say that's like one of the most massive things to be seen here, is that if there's something to be let go of, it is or even practice, because it's not even that this needs to be let go of. You could also be practicing that, hey, just so you know, I might not be observed to be in that much of a challenged state right now. However, this is what I feel like doing. Like, I feel like going to the hospital and blah, 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 right? And for myself, at least, that was something that if someone hears an action, that is that intense, that's how they can understand a little bit more about how you're feeling.
Right.
And then they can sometimes act out your emotion for you, and you can be like, oh, that's the emotion I should be kind of experiencing right now, right?
Right.
Like, they're gonna be like, whoa, 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 this is really serious. And you're like, whoa, 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 okay, I can respond and I can mirror that. And that's like kind of how the practice of, I'd say, empathy and vulnerability works, because a lot of us are out of touch with our feelings, but there's a lot of people that are in touch with them. And when you say, like, when I would say something and be like, like, I really, like, this past week, like, wanted to, like, kill myself. It's like, like, people's response is so much more than if you're in a state where you're not even in touch with the gravity of that statement, So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I tried communicating it a few times, and then eventually I cried. And then she was just like, oh, I've never seen you cry. This must be bad.
Yeah.
And then that did kind of reflect back to me like, oh, like, she's never seen me cry. Okay.
Yeah, right.
I've certainly cried many times, but I guess it's usually alone.
Yeah.
I
hear you.
Yeah. So, I think it was, and it wasn't helpful, and not just her, but like if anyone was in that position, it's like, even though they're trying to be supportive and empathize, and they're like, oh no, like I know what you're feeling. I get anxiety too. It's like, no. This is different.
Yeah.
You don't know. It's because I'm like trying to, communicate that experience and not get it. And this is one of those things. I'm going to step into that vulnerability of discomfort because I feel kind of crazy even saying it. So I think one of the background thoughts that scares me is, so I did I've done different medicines, but one of the most powerful medicines was a couple summers ago. I did a meditation retreat, and it was like in touch with inner child, doing somersaults, playing, doing it was just a lot of beauty. And then there was one night where I was I was staying in a tent and I was by myself. And I had this dream that in the dream I was like answering a phone, and there was someone on the other end, and I'm like talking to them, and it felt like there was like a storm or something, and I'm like asking for help or something, and then they're like, you've called before. And then I don't know how the rest of it went, but basically the thing that shouted in my mind was, you've been sexually abused. And I woke up in my tent freaked out, because there was no person, place, or thing. So it was like dream world and an announcement being made, but it didn't take me to a specific place. So it really was discombobulating, because I'm like, is this about me? Is it about somebody else? And so that was kind of jarring. And then being in the meditation silent retreat, where the next morning I can't talk to anybody.
Right, of course.
And then just being silent through that. So there was also an ayahuasca experience where, because that was in the back of my mind, I remember asking Aya just the question up front, and she didn't give me an answer. And she was just like, you already know the answer. And then I didn't know the answer. And so then I got into this mental loop that is similar to the mental loops I get into now.
Very interesting, because when she says you already know the answer, I feel like where that's coming from is she's witnessing you giving your power away. And, there's an aspect in which we can see ayahuasca or any person give us answers, and then when they give that power back, it's at a moment where like it's meant to be taken back, and we're meant to be going, oh well, I already know this to be true.
Yeah, and I shut down.
Right.
And it's because, again, I'm rationalizing. I'm like, I don't have person, place, or thing.
Well,
I making this up? Is it my imagination?
Well,
and this
the
kind of
root of that is doubt. So
Right.
so that's why she's saying, but you're doubting. And it's like, well, you must confront this doubt, because this doubt it is not necessarily just to do with this. It's playing out in other ways, right? I want to speak briefly just to the people having repressed memories on medicine coming up, because very often we've had people in the community and other places where these come up, and then their first idea is to just like become a victim advocate, or to hold the people who they believe did it accountable, or whatever, which is a bizarre response to, what you can do. What you can do is, like, if that makes you feel like you're gonna feel better about that, maybe for some people that's a relevant path. However, what we're seeing in this moment, right, is that there's an energy to do with that, where it happened. Does it matter how, when, where? No. But you do know that there's doubt to do with that you're doubting yourself on something deep down. Then, where is that doubt manifesting itself in other areas of your life? That is one of the big things, right? Then if we go into the experience, well, if this did happen, what would that child have felt? Fear of being out of control and all of these things, and being possessed and taken over, and
Right.
these are all things that have a high correlation, right? They have a high correlation in that energy. So to be able to just see that, what could this experience have manifested as in my life? Just like how we look back as my past as a warrior and be like, well, I must have had these traits in order for me to be who I am today. And now how are those traits still in a ripple effect, right? How is that experience still rippling into your life, right? Because if we just go, oh, now I'm a victim, and like, oh, it's just, that's horrible that happened. Like, you're to blame, and you're to blame, and you didn't protect me. And it's like, whoa, it's not actually going to benefit, I don't believe, in most cases, anyone to be going down that path. Maybe for a short period of time, but like, hang that phone up real quick and be like, how is that experience rippling into my life now? Like, what would a child who has gone through that have felt? I want to also point out that just because that is being shown to you doesn't mean that it has happened.
Right. And I think that's the part I'm getting stuck
That's
in
the
and lost on.
and that's why so it's showing you, there's a lot of things that are coming through with this, right? It's like showing you that you have a potential to doubt, and within that doubt, there's a loop that can take place. There's a fear of, if an energy comes out in me, it could be representative as someone that is being abused could be like freaking out, if they let that energy out, if it's stored within them now, that could look very troubling to someone, right? And we are like, I'd rather just remain who I am now. So yeah, like do you kind of correlate with
Yeah, I mean that's
all of
helpful
this?
because that's the thing. Like I'm saying, like when so that was one of the things I was talking about earlier. Like if I was like, okay, like I wrote that out. Okay, so if this happened, like how does that change who I am, or how does that like? And I didn't really feel like it had much of an impact on me. I think where I'm stuck on is why did that come up, and is it my imagination at play, which also correlates with, I think, the fear of going crazy.
Okay, so
I'm making up things.
This is the reason why everything comes up, is to show us our emotional response and our coping mechanisms. If we perceive reality in that way, it opens up a whole new frame of perspective. Whereas what I am hearing is you're very safe in your mind. You're very safe in this space of being like, oh, well this. And you're avoiding the aspect of, this thing came up and it made me feel this way, right? And that feeling is beckoning you. So sometimes what can happen, right, is it can show us these very strong experiences. Like one of the worst things we could pretty much have as a kid, it would be that. So it's like, we need to awaken this emotional response within you to honor that feeling and essentially surrender into that feeling, right? So it could be that, there are aspects of our personality that we surrender, but there are aspects of our behavior we surrender naturally by surrendering into our emotions. Surrendering into them, just being like, what is this emotion here to teach me? Because if we go immediately back into our head, that's how those thought loops happen, and we go da 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 da, and we stay up here,
Right.
and then we do go kind of kooky,
Yeah, because I'm
we
trying to
get
figure out the plot. Give me
Yes.
the
so
story.
masculine minded.
Give me the story so I can understand it. But what I'm
Yes.
hearing you say is like it doesn't. Maybe it's a repressed memory. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's a manifestation of this is something that would trigger, like you said, what a child would feel because there's something that like an emotion there.
Yes.
And so rather than getting stuck on the story of it.
Yes.
Because that's the thing is like it doesn't feel. Well, I'm not even going to say that, but it doesn't seem to really matter. I think the part I'm hung up on is did it or didn't.
Yes. And that's usually what people, this is the most interesting thing about life is like life is a sequence of events that brings up moments, and those moments contain feelings. And if our goal, which mine is very aligned with Eastern spirituality, to be in the moment, that is to be in your feelings. And if we're in our minds, we are in the potentiation of the avoidance of the moment perpetually, right? It's like, we're continually checking out, essentially. But yeah, so I believe and this is kind of my framework of how my evolution has played out. I realized that my coping was the same thing. I was go into my mind and figure this out. There must be something to figure out. There must be something to do. What do I do? What do I figure out? How do I make this make sense and correlate this to this? And it's as if you're the difference between reading a book and listening to music. It's
Right.
like, do we want to read music? You're like, I'd rather feel it, right? And life is here to beckon the music to be felt within the experience. Understood sometimes, but so much less than felt. It's like the amount we actually need to understand. It seems like in our world, we need to understand a lot of things. But I don't know. I don't think there's a whole lot. Once we figure out the basics of like what our career is, how our partner is, how we communicate with each other, and what things I like to do on a daily basis, it's like your mind can kind of like, and you can just feel, and yeah.
So I guess that's the evolution that's taken place is because there are parts that I can feel into, and there's parts that I'm still feeling out of and jumping back up into the head. So even like that ayahuasca experience, it was like I didn't get a clear answer, so it was like I was fighting with her, and then it was just like I confused surrender with giving up. Or I was giving up rather than surrendering. So I maybe convinced myself that I was surrendering, but really what I was doing is I was going like, whatever, and like lay down.
Yeah.
And then just in a few hours of a mental loop that was like hell, because I wasn't actually surrendering to the experience. I was just giving up. I was like, I'm done playing this.
Yeah. It was like a child when they're like, oh, like get me out of here. It's like a resistance.
Right.
You're like, I'm bored and this is dumb.
Yeah.
I hear you, man. And I've been in so many experiences with Aya where it's like, get me out of here. I do not understand what this is trying to teach me. But yeah, there's.
And so there's almost like I don't want to. I mean, I'm going to say the word PTSD, but I don't think it's quite that strong, and I don't want to offend people who've really had PTSD. But like, there's like a PTSD or like an unfinished business, I think, left from that experience. Because it's interesting when I have these moments of going out of control that I always correlate it to
that.
This feels like an ayahuasca experience.
Yes.
Why does it feel like an ayahuasca experience? Because it mirrors the experience within that Aya ceremony. An ayahuasca experience can also be drastically different.
Yes, yeah.
So it's interesting that when I'm in that place of out of control and mental loop, that I'm associating it with that.
Well, on Aya experience, you can definitely, like, that's what I would correlate it to too. You know, like when I'm having those experiences, I'm like, well, I feel like I'm on Aya. And what a great gift it is to have the ayahuasca experience continue with us. The difference is sometimes I think your first time was much more pleasant. The second time was much more challenging. And when we start going into those challenging experiences, there is a continuum that happens within our lives where that energy starts to like kind of revisit. And and it's really about how we show up to it. And like, so if there's a challenge coming up, so let's say some emotion comes up that's challenging. Normally, as a guy or as any individual that is analytically thinking, we want to rationalize. Where did it come from? How do we figure this out? Like, I don't want to feel this. This sucks. And then at some point, it goes away with us just being in our heads. We think we're solving it, but we're not.
Right.
We're just trying to push it away and just trying to like avoid. And we're like, And really, the only thing I have seen that has brought me to the next step of my evolution is allowing that to overtake me and completely overtake my entire body. And that's the surrender I'm talking about. It's not like okay, it's here and like I'll surrender, I'm here. You know, it's like you're actually like embracing. It's an embracing surrender where you're allowing the whole energy to overtake your entire body, overtake your psyche, overtake your nervous system. It feels like you're choosing the wrong thing at first. Right? I'm sure this correlates to something else, but yeah, it feels wrong at first. I would say you could correlate it to doing a public speech. Okay, right. At first it's like, this really sucks. Like, maybe I should just not do this. Maybe I should just go home. Right? It's like, that's, that wrong decision. But then once you get on the stage, it's like, this feels like the wrong decision. But then once you get through it a certain period of time, it's like, whoa, I really learned from this. I just need to like step up. Bravery, right? So there's an immense bravery in surrender. And that surrender requires us to fully allow it to overtake us. And then once we're in it, then we inquire. Then we go, okay, I'm feeling this. What are you here to teach me? And with absolute patience and absolutely no expectation that there's going to be an answer, inquire from that state when it's fully taking you over and you're fully in it, you're fully present with it. That's the practice. But sometimes that's harder to do because we already have a program and a patterning in our brain to go upwards. So the other thing that helps me get out of my brain is a practice called noting practice, where you go, oh, I'm feeling something, but I'm trying to go into my brain. I'm feeling something, but I'm trying to go into my brain. And you allow yourself to stay there, because that is being aware of that process taking place is going to loosen up the grasp of the patterning. Because if you go into patterning, patterning remains. Right. If you think that you should go out of patterning and do something else, resistance remains. Then there's, I must just note what I'm doing because there's nothing else I can do here. And that place can feel a little thought loopy at times, but it's really not, because if you go about your day and you're noting what you do and then you start thinking and you go like, oh, okay, I'm like thinking and I'm resisting something to do with work. I'm like, breathe and back to dishes or
right.
whatever, right? Like it's a mindfulness practice that is infinitely applicable and should be infinitely applied to pretty much everything that we do, especially the emotional resistance and or thought loops and all of that, because that's like our kryptonite as humans. That's like when people go into Aya, they're either experiencing immense resistance because they believe the experience should be different than it is,
yep.
or they're in a loop of thoughts trying to rationalize or figure out how to get out of this or something.
Like, totally. So I'm inquiring at the state of resistance as opposed to stepping through, surrendering, and then inquiring.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it. Because it's like I'm being like, it feels like my nervous system gets hijacked. I'm feeling all this intense stuff, and then I jump up here and go, what? What did I do? Did I take something?
Right.
Why is it? What's happening? As opposed to totally.
Well, yeah. Did I? Well, that's the thing that can happen too, right? It's like, oh, did I just like it was there?
That's too much coffee.
Yeah, too much. Yeah, exactly. Was it this? Was it because
I joint have something in
yeah,
it?
did I watch a movie where this? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we can go into the thoughts that this is so out of the ordinary, but it's actually so out of the ordinary. Even if you did smoke a joint and there was something in it, that wouldn't happen. You know what I mean?
Right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the confusing part.
That's the funny part where you can't ignore it, right? It's like beckoning you to not ignore what's happening.
Yeah. It's a wild ride.
So do you feel like there's something that has manifested or landed through this conversation that you can implement?
Totally. So I think what really hit home for me was what is this feeling in my body asking of me, or what is this feeling, rather than trying to figure out what caused the feeling or what the feeling is attached to, kind of letting go of that and just being like, what am I feeling and what is it maybe trying to show me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think just aspects of reality are opening themselves up to me, and I'm just on that journey of figuring it out. Totally. I think it's one thing to go have a DMT experience, go have this experience, and to touch these places. It's another thing when there's just no, like I'm just like in it. Like real life is psychedelic right now, and I'm learning, like I said, how to be in that, because ultimately that's what I've asked for. I know that's what I've asked for. It's just like I was saying to you before. It's not in the confines of I'm agreeing to walk through this door for a specified amount of time and touch these places. It's this is my life. I'm in these places. And that's very new to me and clearly very scary.
It sure is, but it can be very exciting. So if you one of the teachers I follow, he says that fear, or anxiety is just excitement filtered through a negative belief. So what you can actually do is be like, I am excited, like there's a part of me when these demonic experiences happen and I notice that fear comes up, it's a warrior kind of response, where what would you see a warrior do if he's like, got something going down? It's like you amp yourself up. You'd be like, all right, bring it. Let's do this. Like bring it. Give me your worst, and in that, it's an overcompensation, but within that overcompensation, it's kind of a requirement. It's like hyping yourself up, and then it will balance itself out at some point. Because if you just, if you run, you lose, and you're not just going to go from fear to just like perfect state, you're going to overcompensate. And that overcompensation has been valuable for me for sure, right?
Yeah, because I think initially that was almost my reaction of like, well, how cool is it that I'm interacting with beings? And then it hits differently, where it's like, what the fuck is happening in my reality right now? Yeah. Sweet. I mean, I'm lucky that I have a partner that is like, I feel like she was almost jealous that I met aliens.
Aliens, demons, who knows what
exactly.
What it was.
But she's like, that's like up her alley.
Yeah. If she knew how uncomfortable it was, she'd probably not say that. But yeah.
So
sweet, man.
Thanks for that. That was helpful.
Great chat, man.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming.
For sure.
Sweet.